Good morning, dear students. Today I have taken the topic of discussion on clinical one, and it's related to dermatology as well as pharmacology. The topic of discussion is bird's eye view on clinical aspects of skin and dermatological pharmacology with special interest on antifungals and topical corticosteroids. So we'll show you the physiological structure of skin. We'll discuss different vehicles and different topical preparations. We'll also discuss about few of the oral and injectable preparations used to treat different skin conditions. And obviously, as per the name of this title, we'll give special emphasis on the antifungal drugs as well as the topical corticosteroids. So this is basically a structure of skin which showing it's divided into 3 layers. It's an anatomical division, and as we all know is the largest organ in our body. So skin is the largest organ which is anatomically divided into 3 distinct layers. The first one is epidermis, which consists of stratum corneum, granulosum and spinosum, followed by the dermis, and the last one is hypodermis or subcutaneous tissue. And if you see in the lowermost layer in the subcutaneous tissue, the green line which is showing basically the lymphatics, the red line is a wavy line which is showing the arterial supply, cutaneous arterial blood vessels, and the blue line which is obviously indicating the venous supply at that particular region. Now this first layer, the topmost layer, consists of the epidermis, which is basically a multi-layered keratinizing stratified squamous epithelium, and the outermost part of this epidermis is a lipid rich structure, that is stratum corneum, which is basically a dead layer which prevents water loss from the body, and it also protects against different noxious agents in the environment. This stratum corneum is used to come up from the bottom, and it takes around 28 days. So from the live skin to become the dead skin, the time usually is taken 28 days, which is normally reduced to 14 days in a disease like psoriasis, and hence you will see the scale like structures. The second or the mid zone is the dermis, which is a thick, highly vascular layer made up of ground substance, fibroblast and collagen fibers. They are also having different skin appendages and the sweat glands, the pilosebaceous unit embedded in it. This layer is richly supplied with nerves, mostly it's a sympathetic supply, and it is metabolically active. The lowermost layer is the subcutaneous tissue layer, or it's a fibrofatty layer with varying quantities of adipose tissue in different regions of the body. And the layer provides physical and thermal protection to the deeper structure of the body. So we are shifting to the next slide so that we can show you when we are applying certain kind of medications via topical route, how it is going to be absorbed and how it is showing, binding with its receptor and showing its action. So this structure you will see is having showing a vehicle. So it means that the topical drug usually has 2 components. The first component is the base or vehicle, and the second one is the active ingredient. If you recollect your memory and think about your pharmacy preparations, you can visualize the preparations of sulfur ointment, where yellow soft paraffin was basically, or the white soft paraffin was basically working as a vehicle. So the drug was bound to the vehicle, then it comes, diffuses through the stratum corneum level. It can be via paracellular route, transcellular route, and once it is coming there, it can be stored as a reservoir. Vehicle itself can be worked as a reservoir at the level of stratum corneum, and from this layer onwards is usually the live skin. So basically the topmost structure is the dead skin, and then the stratum spinosum, which is also kind of layer where the drug uh, is coming through, and here a part of it is metabolized and maybe binding with a receptor. Then it's coming further down and it's partitions into the dermis. It binds to the receptor. From there onwards it can show its action. That means it is not systematically absorbed. But if it is crossing that layer and reaching a level of subcutaneous fat, where you have seen that the hypodermis, that is lymphatic vessels, the arterioles, the cutaneous blood vessels, the arteries, the venous layers are there being depicted in the previous slide. Those are the sites from where the drug is actually going to be absorbed in the systemic circulation. So once it is coming at the bottommost layer, it will be absorbed more and more. If it is remaining above that, it will usually have local action, and though a little bit of it is even going to be absorbed from that particular zone. Once the drug is reaching its layer, crossing this particular layer and is absorbed, we'll see that it is depending on different things, like the different regions being involved. If you are applying certain drugs on the face or in the genitalia, you must be very, very careful. Like in case of topical steroids, you must use a low potent steroid in those zones, because if you are giving a high potent one, it will be absorbed in very high amount, because the skin layer is very thin, and hence it may lead to different kinds of adverse drug reaction. So regional variation is always there when you are applying a topical preparations. Normally anogenital area requires 2 gram of a preparation, whereas anterior or posterior trunk around 3 gram. 4 gram required usually in the lower extremity, whereas in the entire body, if you are applying certain kind of topical preparations, it will take around 25 to 30 grams of the preparations. The drug concentration is depending again 0.5% or 0.25% on the basis of which you can decide the potency of the drug. And the high potent drugs are usually having a vehicle form like ointment, cream, and the salt which is being associated with a particular drug like halobetazole propionate, which is basically a steroid, is basically a high potent one. But if you change the salt, if you change the concentration, it may become a mid potent preparation. So it's the concentration of the drug as well as the vehicle which you are going to use will ultimately decide the potency of a drug and its action in different individuals. The dosing schedule, it is depending on how many times you are applying certain drug. You may applying some kind of antifungals twice daily via topical route. Some topical preparations may be used once daily like laliconazole, whereas the one you have used in your prescription, clotrimazole and miconazole, these are used twice daily formulation. So the dosing schedule is going to be different for different drugs, and on the basis of which the effect of the drug will vary from or rather it will vary between different individuals. Then comes the occlusion. If you occlude a particular part, if you're using some kind of polythene or plastic packet after giving steroids, it will be absorbed better, but you always have to remember that it has its pros and cons. That means the occlusion will give rise to greater absorption, so the effect will be better. But if the patient is immunosuppressed, or if the chance of absorption is more, it may lead to different kind of adverse drug reactions. So occlusion has its own advantages and disadvantages, and the decision will be taken by the clinician, and the decision is going to be individualized. So it will vary from patient to patient on the basis of its clinical conditions. Now the vehicle, which is basically one of the most important component of these topical preparations. It may form as a reservoir for the active ingredient. It may allow the local release of suitable amount of the active drug. It may provide a reasonably safe infrastructure for the practical application. And most of the vehicles are also useful for their physical actions such as soothing, lubricating, cooling, drying, moisturizing, even hydrating and protecting effects are there. So these are the things which are extremely important for in consideration to vehicles. There are certain things, the factors which will determine the choice of a vehicle. Its hydrating or drying property, so it is depending on the nature of the skin lesion, whether it's drying in nature or it is having oozing property. Its ability to assist in the absorption of the active ingredient, its physical and chemical interaction at the level of stratum corneum or with the stratum corneum, and the stability of the final formulation. So stability is basically depending on the person who is formulating the drug, and the person most of the time is a person belonging to pharmacy. So it's basically a pharmaceutical aspect of pharmacology, where we just have to rely on the preparations. We have to rely that a certain drug is basically stable, found stable in a inside a vehicle. So the stability of the therapeutic agent is basically depending on the nature of the drug as well as on the vehicles. There are different types of skin lesions which we are seeing in the clinical practice. The first one is called macule, which is basically less than 2 cm in diameter and not raised above the surface of the surrounding skin. Whereas if macule is larger than 2 cm, it is called a patch. Whereas papule is a small solid lesion which is basically less than 1 cm raised above the surface of the surrounding skin and usually palpable. The raised lesions larger than 1 cm, which is a firm and easily palpable, called nodule. So papule, and the bigger one is the nodule. Similarly, if a fluid filled lesion which is less than 1 cm is called a vesicle, whereas the one which is containing leukocytes inside it, it's called pustule, and if it is more than 1 cm in diameter, it is called bulla. So even a soft raised encapsulated lesion which contains semi-solid or liquid material is known as cyst, whereas the erythematous papule, which is usually due to short-lived dermal edema, is usually identified as a wheal. So these are different preparations or different not preparations, these are different clinical features or clinical feature of skin lesions which we are observing in everyday practice. Usually the absorption of a drug into the skin is slow and incomplete. It depends on the lipid solubility of the preparation, the state of hydration of the stratum corneum, drug concentration in the vehicle, the thickness of the skin, which is very important. It is important that the thickness of the skin varies in different regions, which I mentioned already. The quantity of the preparations, which I have already discussed, the presence of inflamed area, which allows actually the higher penetration of the drug. So you must be very, very careful while using corticosteroid, and the use of the occlusive dressing, and I have already discussed its pros and cons. So we are shifting to the next slide. So in this slide you will see it's coming from above downwards. The tinctures are basically the alcoholic solution of macerated vegetable drugs, and the way dressings are mostly applied on the oozing lesions. We are using calamine or potassium permanganate, 1:4,000 to 1:10,000 strength. Then comes lotions, which is basically a liquid preparation containing medicinal ingredients meant for local action, usually used externally. The gels are a kind of form which will be discussed later. The powders, which ideally I would like to avoid because it has its own benefit. It will dry up certain areas, will give you a cooling effect, even astringent effect, but it will also block the pilosebaceous unit. So the chance of infection is higher whichever the powder you are going to use in clinical practice. The problem with the powder is even with the baby powder will not give you anything new than the normal common powder which is available in the market. But the chance of infection as is high due to blockage of pilosebaceous units, is always better to avoid powder form. The paste is basically a thicker form, and these pastes are stiffer and more adhesive than other lubricating preparations, and they are made of a finely divided insoluble powder such as zinc oxide. It is incorporated into an ointment base. The creams and ointments are going to be discussed in the next slide, and you will see the potency and the ability of the vehicle to retard evaporation. It's coming from above downwards, whereas in acute inflammation and the oozing lesions, you are basically applying the above 3 or 4. The gels are mostly suited in skin where the patient is having pimples, especially it is termed as acne vulgaris. So in those cases you can use these kind of gel preparations. The drug should be, the vehicle should be in the gel form. Whereas in the chronic inflammations like xerosis, scaling, that means the dry lesion, is better to use cream and ointments. So in this slide you will see that there is a difference between the ointment, cream, gel and lotions being depicted, and this ointment is basically a solid or liquid dispersed in and base, whereas cream is basically oil in water preparations, whereas on the other hand the ointment is water in oil, but there are exceptions. These ointment and cream can be compared while prescribing it in the clinical practice. So the main disadvantage of using ointment is its staining property and its greasy nature, whereas the cream has its advantage over the ointment. But the ointment can be applied once daily, so patient compliance would be better in that context, whereas cream usually is given twice or thrice daily. Whereas in case of occlusion, moderate to high increase in the skin moisture will be seen with ointment, that is not seen in case of cream form. But as I said, in the pigmentation, chance of pigmentation is higher in ointment form, and as it's greasy, so it's always better to avoid ointment form wherever you feel cosmetic problem is lying with the patients. So just to summarize, emulsion is basically a fine dispersion of minute droplets of one liquid in another in which it is not soluble or mixable, whereas the ointment is defined as the water in oil emulsion. But there are exceptions. In cream is the oil in water emulsion, like cosmetics, the vanishing cream, the washable cream. So all these are the cream forms, but the exceptions are there. The lotion is basically oil in water, and gel is water soluble emulsion with gelling agents. So that is the special characteristic of gel, and gel, as I said, mostly used in the acne prone skin. So this is the first slide I am going to discuss related to skin related problems, and this problem is nothing but cutaneous adverse drug reactions, and you will see 3 lesions being discussed here. The first one is the topmost one, the leg is placed. It is basically nothing but toxic epidermal necrolysis, whereas the other one where ladies lips are being shown and the back part is shown, it's a case of Steven-Johnson syndrome, and in between this which is lasting is called the overlap. So sorry, so this is basically a overlap. So there are 3 things. Basically drug related problems, drug related cutaneous adverse drug reactions are known as cutaneous adverse drug reactions which is separated from erythema multiforme. Any drug related target lesion is or drug induced skin problem is called erythema multiforme, but these cutaneous adverse drug reactions are separated from erythema multiforme and they themselves form a group, and they are usually characterized or their prognosis mortality is based on score 10 analysis or score 10 score, and usually few things are taken into account, like the body surface area. If it is less than 10%, it is called Steven-Johnson syndrome. If it is more than 30%, it is called toxic epidermal necrolysis. In between 10 and 30, it is called overlap syndrome. So most of the common drugs like amoxicillin, clavulanic acid, ampicillin, ciprofloxacin, different NSAIDs, different anti-epileptics, phenytoin, carbamazepine, they are the common culprits and responsible for causing this kind of reactions, and these are tackled in the ICCO setup. Stop the culprit drug first, then you have to give proper electrolyte, so you have to maintain the electrolyte balance, then you have to use one antibiotic to stop or to prevent future infections or superadded infections, like ceftriaxone like drug may be used via injectable route, and then the main drug, either cyclosporin at a proper dose, which is basically an immunosuppressant, or immunoglobulin must be your first choice. But sometimes it so happens that people are not scared of using this kind of medications, so they are using corticosteroids, and corticosteroids at a dose of 0.5 to 1 milligram per kg of body weight is quite helpful in this kind of conditions, but mostly it is helpful in Steven-Johnson syndrome, not in case of toxic epidermal necrolysis. So in toxic epidermal necrolysis, steroids can be used as add-on therapy with cyclosporin or immunoglobulin. This is another cutaneous adverse drug reactions. The one which is shown in the left hand side is basically fixed drug reactions. The black color lesions, patches are there. Basically it's happened due to the effect of metronidazole. It may be happened also due to the effect of ciprofloxacin, and you see the same lesion is basically appearing on the same site whenever the person is taking that specific drug. So drug history is extremely important, and patient must communicate this thing to the doctor while giving a proper history, so that a clinician should not prescribe it even in future. The right hand side, the one which is showing is basically little bit of edematous lesions, and these are urticaria. This is acute urticaria, but happened due to metronidazole. Both the cases are taken from our college and from college outdoor. So the patients are basically complaining of these kind of things with drugs. These two are different patients, whereas this acute urticaria may be tackled with antihistaminics like levocetirizine, desloratadine, or the first generation one like hydroxyzine, and topical corticosteroids. There are sometimes the patients complaining of chronic urticaria. Sometimes the urticaria is not under control, so it can be termed as chronic idiopathic urticaria. So these are the different types of clinical problems, skin problems, which may be manifested in the common scenario of clinical practice in dermatology. These are the lesions showing lesions where the patients were diabetic, and a simple follicular lesion, or basically a lesion which is kind of boil or folliculitis, acute folliculitis in nature, basically converted to cellulitis. So patients started with amoxicillin clavulanic acid combination, but in both the cases it was not controlled with that, Blood sugar was under control, but the patient used to get a combination of linezolid, which is basically a preparation given for the coverage of step 2 and staph aureus in amoxicillin and clavulanic acid resistant cases, with preparation like meropenem, and in other case the piperacillin tazobactam were given. So it's a combination therapy, ultimately going to be helpful for the patient. So initially we used to start treatment in case of impetigo and in case of the folliculitis with topical preparations. These are all topical antibiotics. Mupirocin is the one where replacement of isoleucine residue is giving itself almost equitable efficacy or effectiveness as oral amoxicillin and erythromycin. So mupirocin is basically acting on the gram-positive coccus and gram-positive bacteria, and these is extremely effective in skin infections. And other than the lesions, it should be used in a nares, pinna, in your umbilicus, perineum, and in the axilla. Whereas the fusidic acid is basically a replacement of mupirocin, which is the only steroidal antibiotic available in the market. So you can use either fusidic acid or mupirocin. Commonly, the one which is marketed in the common clinical practice is Neosporin, which contains neomycin, polymyxin B, and colistin, which is also having a chance of causing irritation and dermatitis-like conditions. So one must be very careful. If it's a absolute case of infection as not associated with any dermatitis, you can prescribe this formulation. Whereas in case of acne vulgaris, you can prescribe topical formulation of clindamycin, erythromycin, or the drug like azithromycin. Whereas in acne rosacea, you can use metronidazole like drug. So let us come to the extensive discussion on the drugs used in clinical practice for fungal infection. So these are all fungal lesions. From right hand side, the first one, the back was shown, then it is the breast, and side of the breast is being shown where a circumscribed lesions and clearing from in center is highlighted very clearly, and this is a case of tinea corporis. So tinea corporis is basically a fungal infection, and it's basically a superficial fungal infection caused by dermatophytes. Whereas in the left hand side, you will see a nail is being projected, and the nail is showing almost a kind of white coloration, and this is probably due to fungal infection, but we are not very sure whether it's due to dermatophyte infection or candida infection. Ideally it should be you have to take a sample of this and you have to visualize it under Kevich medium so that you can diagnose it properly. If there is hyphae, you can diagnose it as a candida, and accordingly you can select your drug. Now these are the other lesions, similar type of dermatophyte lesions where patients were actually applying corticosteroid, and hence these become tinea incognitio. So unnecessary use of steroid in case of fungal infection will create a lot of problem. Though it is topical in nature, but still it will cause a lot of problem. But you can use antifungal drugs with corticosteroid for first 5 to 7 days to reduce inflammation in some cases, but it is depending on the decision of a clinician. Now the organisms which are responsible for superficial fungal infections, that means the skin and mucous membrane, are the surface one, and one such one is Marassalgia farfa. This is also known as pityriasis versicolor or tinea versicolor. It is called versicolor because it's showing both the colors, white, small hyperpigmented patches, and black one. The black one is not shown in this picture, only the white one is being depicted. So from here we can understand how this Marsilgia farfer infection is looking like. The cutaneous one, where we have shown the dermatophyte species, that means the ringworm infection. These are the pictures of the ringworm infection. And there are different invasive fungal infections. A few of them are opportunistic. If you look at the nail, you can understand it may be due to candida. But there are some other infections like cryptococcus. There are some filamentous fungi like mucor, like Basido botes. There are some mycetoma, maduromycosis. There are some species like aspergillus. So all these are responsible for causing invasive fungal infection. There are some protozoan like fungi, and these fungi is basically Pneumocystis girovesi, causing pneumonia in HIV patients or patients suffering from AIDS. There are some true pathogenic fungus like Histoplasma capsulatum, Blastomyces dermatitis, Coccidioides immitis. So these are all causing deep fungal infection. And beside this, there are some other species like Trichosporum, Sporothrix. So these may also cause a lot of problem to the patients. Now, these are the common agents which are used in clinical practice. If you look at the diagnosis of the fungal infection, then you can select one drug for each of the infections. Like in tinea pedis and cruris, we can select topical azoles like miconazole, clotrimazole, or the drug like laliconazole nowadays. So iberconazole, these are all effective drugs. In tinea corporis the same, but you may use oral agents like terbinafine or the azoles like fluconazole or itraconazole. In onychomycosis, it's going to be your mostly the oral azoles which are very helpful, and beside oral ones you may sometimes use the topical preparations. Out of the oral ones, if you are not sure about the diagnosis, it's better to use fluconazole or itraconazole. In cutaneous candidiasis, it's basically better to use topical azoles, nystatin, and with that you can use oral azole group of drugs. The vulvovaginal candidiasis, you can use single dose of this azole group of drugs like fluconazole, or you can use itraconazole or ketoconazole, or you may use the topical preparations, especially clotrimazole, which are available in the vaginal troche form. The oral candidiasis, where the topical nystatin this clotrimazole are also available in the mouth pen form for use in mucous membrane and the oral lesions. These are not causing any such dangerous adverse drug reactions in spite of being absorbed from there in the circulation. Esophageal candidiasis, where you have to use the systemic drugs like fluconazole, almost 200 milligram dose given for 7 to 14 days, or you have to use the newer triazoles. If the oral ones are not going to be effective, you can use the injectable ones like voriconazole. So these are the common agents, antifungal agents, which are used in clinical practice. Now those used, if you want to go for the classification, then you have to classify it as those employed topically, and those drugs are azoles, these terbinafine, the cyclopyroxolamine, nystatin. So these are all given in the topical form. The systemically given forms are antibiotics. One is the macrolide group, that is amphotericin B. Another one is grisofulvin. One antimetabolite is used there, that is flucytosine. The azole derivatives are also there, like clotrimazole, ketoconazole, itraconazole, fluconazole. And there is one allyl amine derivative, that is terbinafine. And nowadays, in case of neutropenic patients with fungal infections, we are using echinocandin derivative, that is caspofungin. So let's start with most commonly used drug in case of superficial fungal infection, that is the azole group of antifungal agents. This azole group, they can be classified into usually two types: imidazole, and imidazoles are miconazole, clotrimazole. Usually they are indicating 2 nitrogen atoms in the azole ring, whereas the triazole group, which are having 3 nitrogens in the azole ring, and those drugs are itraconazole and fluconazole. Their antifungal activity usually is being manifested as they are interfering with fungal cytochrome P450 enzymes, that is 14 alpha sterol demethylase, and disturb the membrane. They also cause accumulation of hydrogen peroxide with lethal effect, and they have a broad spectrum antifungal and antibacterial activity. They are extremely effective agent against dermatophyte, the candida, as well as they can be useful in the against cryptococcus, blastomyces, nocardia, coccidioides, madurella. So these agents can be used both in systemic and local infection. They are less selective, the imidazoles, and they can interact with human cytochrome P450, causing more drug interaction and adverse drug reactions. All azoles are potentially embryotoxic and teratogenic and should be avoided during pregnancy and lactation. But you can use the topical forms because the chance of absorption is lesser. The azoles used systematically and potent inhibitors of hepatic microsomal enzymes and may increase the blood levels and toxicity of different other drugs metabolized by the same enzyme. So chance of drug interaction is always there with the azoles. The miconazole and the clotrimazole, these are the topical forms. Clotrimazole is available in the 1% cream, whereas the miconazole is basically a broad spectrum antifungal and having activity against gram-positive antibacterial, gram-positive bacteria. Whereas ketoconazole is available in both forms, topical as well as oral. It is water soluble and well absorbed from the gut. Now ketoconazole inhibits several biosynthetic steps in the synthesis of adrenal and gonadal steroid. Hence the adverse drug reactions are more. You can see gynecomastia, gastric irritation. It's a CYP3A4 inhibitor, hence it inhibits the metabolism of many drugs such as warfarin, phenytoin and oral contraceptives. So the drug-drug interaction is very common. Whereas itraconazole is a broad spectrum antifungal drug. It's related to ketoconazole. It exerts both topical and systemic activity. It is given orally or intravenously. But its bioavailability is variable. It can be metabolized mostly in the liver. It's both a substrate and a potent inhibitor of CYP3A4 enzyme. That means it is also affecting the cytochrome P450 system. And it can cause serious toxicity like cardiac arrhythmia in patients having heart failure with impaired ventricular function, with hypokalemia. So we must be very, very careful while using this drug. Fluconazole is basically available in both forms, the topical as well as the oral form. It's comparatively safer drug because it's 150 milligram once weekly dose is given in case of ringworm infection. So the dosing schedule is wider, and hence the chance of toxicity is comparatively lesser. The rest of the things are almost similar to other azole group of drugs. There is another drug called posaconazole, which is related chemically to itraconazole, and it is particularly useful in prevention and treatment of invasive fungal infections including aspergillosis and oropharyngeal candidiasis refractory to fluconazole. It is preferred to amphotericin B, which is basically a macrolide derivative for the treatment of zygomycete infection. Voriconazole is basically having structural similarity to fluconazole. It undergoes extensive tissue distribution and mostly given via injectable route, the intravenous route. But oral preparations are also available. This is well tolerated but can cause hepatotoxicity. So in case of using any kind of azole group of drug, oral preparations or injectable, you must assess the liver enzymes with the liver function test. The prolongation of QT interval chance is always there with these kind of preparations. Terbinafine, which is basically an allylamine derivative, is a keratophilic like riboflavin but is having cidal action. Rest of all the azole group of drugs are having static action, whereas terbinafine is the only one which is having cidal action, and it inhibits the enzyme squalene epoxidase and therefore blocking ergosterol biosynthesis. It is accumulated squalene and which is basically cytotoxic in nature. Topically, it is also used to treat dermatophyte infections. Mostly the therapy is continued for the oral one is for 1 month, and it may extend up to 3 months, whereas the topical preparations are also used for 1.5 months to 3 months. The injectable preparation is amphotericin B, which is toxic in nature, basically a macrolide group of antibiotic but having antifungal activity against most of the fungus causing deep infection. So those fungus are basically blastomycosis, histoplasma, then your paracoccidiasis, brasiliensis, coccidioidesis imitis. So these are all harmful fungus which can be tackled with injectable amphotericin B preparations. Nowadays, to reduce its toxicity, which is primarily causing nephrotoxicity, we are using a liposomal drug delivery system. So liposomal amphotericin B is showing lesser toxicity in comparison to amphotericin B preparations alone. These amphotericin B in the liposomal drug delivery form can be also useful to treat a case of Kala-Jar, and it is also used in post-Kala-Jar dermal leishmaniasis, that is called PKDL. So this is in brief about the antifungal preparations. This slide is showing one lesion at the right hand side, which is basically showing a small vesicle, whereas the vesicle is healed, and that is showing at the left hand side, and the appearance of few new lesions are being manifested over there. So this is basically a case of varicella infection, that is chicken pox. This is a single infection, that's why it's very difficult to diagnose, but the thing is such that this once this is being spread all over the body, it's having centrifugal distribution, and in some places these things are healing, and in some places these new lesions are appearing. It started from the extremity and it will involve your mucous membrane, it may happen inside mouth, and it also affects your face, chest, almost everywhere in the body. This is a case where chicken pox was healed in a healed condition, and what we are observing is the patient was not being able to close her eyes, and this is basically a case with bilateral facial nerve palsy. Now, after giving steroids for 21 days and acyclovir as a medication of choice in case of chicken pox for 7 to 10 days, patient was absolutely cured. Normally, in case of chicken pox, acyclovir is prescribed at a dose of 800 milligram 4 times daily for 5 days. It can be stretched from 4 times daily to 5 times daily. So, whatever may be the dose you give, if you give it for more than 5 days in an uncomplicated condition, it will only increase the chance of having adverse drug reaction. This slide is showing almost the healed, it's not a healed, rather untreated case of herpes zoster. It's affecting one side of the body, and it's basically following the distribution of a particular nerve and nerve trunk. And here the dose of acyclovir is 800 milligram 5 times daily for 7 to 10 days. Now mostly this is happened due to inactivated varicella, which is being stored or hibernated inside the nerve fibers, nerve trunk. And this is mostly happened in patients where they have a previous history of chickenpox. These are showing distribution of lesions in both sides of the lips and the face, and hence this is basically a simplex infection. This is herpes simplex, where the diagnosis can only be established by giving or by doing lab investigations like IgM and IgG for herpes simplex. It has two varieties, type 1 and type 2, and the drug of choice is again acyclovir. It is 200 milligram 5 times daily. The only difference is acyclovir is a comparatively safe drug, which is showing it's converted to acyclovir triphosphate and is incorporated inside the structure of DNA virus, and that is called counterfeit incorporation mechanism. This is basically a non-receptor mediated drug action. Now in this case you will see that 200 milligram dose is good enough for 5 times daily, and it can be continued for 7 to 10 days. This is because the herpes simplex is lesser resistant to acyclovir in comparison to the other one, that is herpes zoster or chickenpox, which is more resistant, hence the dosing is much higher. And this will be discussed vividly in discussion of antiviral drugs. So these are the drugs. Valacyclovir is a prodrug of acyclovir, and acyclovir already I have mentioned. Use is orolabial herpes simplex, genital herpes simplex, herpes zoster, and chickenpox. The dose is only modified in case of renal dysfunction or renal compromised patients, and it is comparatively a safer drug in pregnancy. It's basically a pregnancy B drug. So in these lesions we are seeing the cleft are involved. Ideally we should have shown the genitalia of the patient, and this type of infection is basically due to scabies. It's caused by Sarcoptes scabies, and it's a female basically a parasite, and the one which is being harboring under the skin. So for this we used to prescribe the drugs like permethrin nowadays, 5% preparations, and it should be applied for 10 to 12 hours overnight application, and patient can be washed it on the next day. Or ivermectin can be given 0.2 milligram per kg of body weight if the age of the patient is less than 12 years. This is basically a case of Norwegian scabies, and which is basically kind of thing where it is spread over due to immunosuppressive nature of the patient. The complications of this kind of things, it may lead to secondary infections and also acute glomerulonephritis. So additional antibiotic and antihistaminic can be prescribed with the antiscabitic drugs, and those drugs usually having scabicidal action. Gamma-mangan hexachloride, which is commonly used in block primary health center or primary health center at 1% strength, it's a cost-effective drug, whereas the permethrin and ivermectin are commonly used in the city practice, where usually a combination is given, or sometimes only permethrin is given to the patients. The advantage of permethrin over gamma-mangan hexachloride is it can be used in a child or even an infant. Less than 2 years old child is safer to permethrin. The chance of having neurotoxicity is much lesser in comparison to gamma-mangan hexachloride. This one is showing a feature of post Kalager dermal leishmaniasis. So basically this is PKDL variety of Indian type. And the drug of choice are miltefosine, or if miltefosine orally is not effective, you can give liposomal amphotericin B, which I discussed in context of antifungal drugs. So amphotericin B can be given in both the conditions, in deep fungal infection as well as in Kala-Jar and in post-Kala-Jar dermal leishmaniasis. These are the lesions where you can see multiple pictures, but it's of the same patients, or rather it's the same disease happening in the different patients. From the right hand side, it's basically a plaque type of psoriasis, whereas the middle one is showing palmoplantar variety of psoriasis, where the scaling is more, it's a keratinizing lesions, and the nails are involved, which all the nails are involved, and hence it can be due to psoriasis or can be due to lichen planus. And for all these, the topical glucocorticoids are extremely helpful, but you can also prescribe some other drugs like vitamin D3 derivative calcipotriol. This is available in the cream form. You can use the different kinds of oil-like substance like coconut oil or Vaseline like things. And if these are not effective, then you can give oral methotrexate. That is another use of methotrexate, psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis. Methotrexate is usually given in oral form, and the blood picture and liver function test should be done before prescribing methotrexate. And if the patient is on methotrexate, you should carry on doing this test at an interval of 2 to 3 months. Now methotrexate should be accompanied by folic acid to reduce chance of megaloblastic anemia. But folic acid is only given twice or thrice weekly, whereas these methotrexate at a dose of 7.5 to 15 milligram should be given once weekly dose. If methotrexate is not useful or not helpful in this regard, then you can use cyclosporine, and even if cyclosporine is not going to be helpful, then you can use these biological agents. Out of that, etanercept and infliximab, these two drugs were used in our own college. Etanercept is basically a TNF alpha inhibitor, and whereas the infliximab is doing the same. The other one, adalimumab, as these are all monoclonal antibodies, ustekinumab and secukinumab, these are probably having action on some different things, and these are all prescribed via subcutaneous route except infliximab, which is given via intravenous route. Here you see the lesions, which is absolutely different from the others because it's affecting your palms. So once lesions, these kind of papular lesions will affect your palm, also that you should suspect a case of secondary syphilis. Though the primary chancre, the patient will give you the history of primary chancre, and here for the treatment you will use benzathine penicillin, which is basically a long-acting penicillin or repository penicillin. It will be gradually released, and usually one injection is sufficient after proper skin test. 1.2 million, rather 2.4 million is given totally, and 1.2 million in each battle, and it should be given after proper skin test. And you must keep adrenaline, corticosteroid and antihistaminic in your hand to tackle any drug related adverse reaction. Now here we are coming to the next aspect of discussing topical formulations, where the corticosteroids, the names have been given, and usually it is divided into 7 classes from high potent to low potent. And you see the beta-mintoson is basically changing its nature when it's present in the ointment form and the cream form. In the ointment forms, most of the times it is useful as a high potent one, whereas the cream form it is useful as the mid-potent one. Whereas as you are coming down towards the bottom, you see the hydrocortisone cream and the desonide cream, which are having low potent action. So potency is decreased from above downwards. Usually the potency is measured previously by placing a vasoconstrictor and doing a vasoconstrictor assay, and nowadays it is done by inducing edema by injecting a phlogistic agent or inflammatory agent in animal models, and it's followed by application of different formulations of corticosteroid. And there is another way of deciding potency of topical corticosteroid, and those are nothing but you have to take patients of the psoriasis suffering from psoriasis, and you see the picture of the characteristic of the psoriatic lesions, how are they going to be minimized after giving different kind of formulation of corticosteroid. So basically this is called psoriatic assay, and by this you can decide the potency of this corticosteroid. These corticosteroids are extremely responsive in atopic dermatitis, seborrheic dermatitis, lichen simplex chronicus, which is basically eczema, stasis dermatitis, later phase of irritant dermatitis, psoriasis, whereas its role is a little bit debatable in DLE, where hydroxychloroquine is a better choice of drugs, sarcoidosis, lichen sclerosus, pemphigus, bullous pemphigoid, vitiligo. And the adverse drug reactions mostly we encounter are the atrophy, skin atrophy, and due to high potent drug you may have seen the problem of hypothalamico-pituitary suppression. So that adrenal crisis or hypothalamico-pituitary suppression is not only seen in case of oral and injectable agents, but it is also manifested in topical agents. You must be very, very careful while prescribing the topical formulations of corticosteroid, especially in the face and genitalia, and while doing occlusion therapy, because chance of absorption is more in these cases. For alopecia, we can classify it into different types. Usually the hair is in the three phases: anagen, catagen, and telogen. And anagen is the growth phase and telogen is the last phase. So if the most of the hairs are present in the growth phase, you will see that it is probably having a good hair growth, and if most of the hairs are in the telogen phase, you will see the patient is probably complaining of huge hair fall. And in some diseases you will see that a huge hair fall occurs at a bulk. Now normally the alopecia can be classified into, for you it can be classified into two types: androgenetic alopecia and alopecia areata. Alopecia areata is basically associated with autoimmune disorders like diabetes and hypothyroidism. For alopecia areata, the treatment is usually oral corticosteroid or injectable corticosteroid, which is given by intradermal route, and or intralesional route, which is basically the triamcinolone commonly prescribed for those patients. Whereas in case of the patients who are having androgenetic alopecia, conversion of dihydrotestosterone from testosterone is commonly responsible for that. And this pattern is been shown, and your hairline is recessing backwards. So in those cases you can use finasteride, but the dose is lesser, 1 milligram. Higher dose of finasteride is given in case of benign hypertrophy of prostate, and with finasteride you can add minoxidil from 2 to 5%. In male patients it can be stretched up to 10%, but in female patient it should be restricted to 2%. Corticosteroids and the local stimulating agent or local irritants like Ambritanjan or Relaxil like gel can be used in alopecia areata. It will only increase local blood supply, and hence the growth of hair is seen in case of alopecia areata, not in androgenetic alopecia. This is a case of vitiligo, which is showing chalky white pigmentation, and in this case, if it is the unstable condition, it should be stabilized by giving oral corticosteroids. Corticosteroid usually continued for 3 to 6 months. Once the condition is unstable, you can prescribe the psoralen compounds, and methoxypsoralen compounds are commonly preferred. It is available in both forms, the topical and the oral form. And after taking those drugs, patient should be exposed to sunlight, usually on the alternate day basis, and the exposure should not be more than 3 to 5 minutes or even 10 minutes, because otherwise these psoralen compounds may lead to blister formation due to high exposure to sunlight, and these diseases usually happen due to destruction of melanocytes by antibody or sometimes by some noxious agents. So melanin synthesis is hampered in case of vitiligo, which is suggested or which is thought to be a case of kind of autoimmune disorder, and these are basically having a huge cosmetic problem. In children, if the person is suffering from vitiligo, normally we are using immunosuppressants like tacrolimus or pymacrolimus in the ointment or in the cream form, and you can expose the baby or the child to narrow band ultraviolet B therapy, and you can also use sunscreen to the patients. So this is in the right hand side showing hyperpigmentation. That is another side effect or adverse drug reaction of corticosteroid. Due to long term use of corticosteroid, the patient was showing hyperpigmented lesions, whereas in the left hand side it is showing that initial hyperpigmentation, and in these cases patients were treated with different drugs. To reduce hyperpigmentation, you can use hydroquinone 2 to 4%, any one of the strength can be used, and it is causing reversible pigmentation, so it's safer. But if you use tretinoin derivative or derivative like corticosteroid, it may lead to irreversible hypopigmentation due to the adverse drug reaction of the drug. So you must be very, very careful while reducing the hyperpigmentation of the drug or selecting a therapy for reducing hyperpigmentation to the patients. And those are the cosmetic agents which are commonly people are getting from the market or medical shops are showing this kind of bleaching effect in case of hyperpigmentation. Those who want to have a fair complexion are taking this medication and will suffer from permanent hyperpigmentation or different kind of skin reactions due to unwanted use of corticosteroid and some other agents. This lady is suffering from acne vulgaris, and acne vulgaris can be classified into 4 types. Grade 1, where you will see only the papular lesions when it is associated with a little bit of nodular like thing, it is called grade 2 variety. The grade 1 and grade 2 is being manifested over there. And then grade 3 is where the pustules are being seen, where the antibiotic, oral antibiotics is necessary. Whereas in grade 4, we will see that nodulocystic variety, and where the patient might have developed some kind of abscess in the face. So it's better to avoid any kind of moisturizer in these patients. Avoid sunscreens. If you have to use at all anything, use the gel form, and different kind of medications are used to treat these cases. This is a case of body acne where none of the topical agents are going to be effective, only the oral agents are going to be helpful to treat these cases. This is a case of acne rosacea, which is characterized by erythematous lesions, which is different from the other ones. In this case, you can use metronidazole, and you have to reduce, you have to control the diet habit of the patient, usually the spicy food, the tea, coffee, exposure to sunlight. So these are responsible factors for causing acne rosacea. And here mostly the doxycycline like antibiotic with topical antibiotic like metronidazole are very effective. So these are the acne preparations which are commonly used in the clinical practice. The retinoic acid, the tretinoin, usually the first line drug which is having effect on the specific receptors alpha, beta and gamma, and it stabilizes lysosomes, it increases RNA polymerase activity, it increases incorporation of thymidine into DNA, it also increases prostaglandin E, cyclic MP and cyclic JP levels. The retinoic acid is also having some effect on the bacteria which is associated with this acne vulgaris, that is Propionibacterium acne. The adapalene is more or less like retinoic acid, but it is not having action on all receptors of retinoic acid. Whereas isotretinoin is an oral tretinoin derivative which is usually given either at a dose of 0.1 to 0.2 milligram per kg of body weight, or it can be extended up to almost 0.5 to 0.6 milligram. Duration will vary accordingly. It can be given for 1 month, it can be stretched up to 6 months or 9 months. And usually, as it is having teratogenic effect, it's almost like a pregnancy X drug. You should tell your female patient not to conceive during taking this isotretinoin, and patient must be very careful while stopping the drug, and after stopping the drug patient must give 2 to 3 months of washout period, and then patient is ready to conceive. And it is not difficult to prescribe these type of medications in male patients, but isotretinoin will change your lipid profile, and hence a complete lipid profile should be advocated to any patients who is getting isotretinoin. It is extremely helpful drug in grade 4 acne and in case of body acne where the topical agents are not effective. Benzyl peroxide is basically a keratolytic agent as well as it is having antibacterial property, whereas clindamycin is having specific action on the bacteria called Propionibacterium acne and the inflammatory mediators released by this bacteria. So usually clindamycin, erythromycin are used in the topical forms, whereas doxycycline, azithromycin and minocycline are given in the oral form. Mostly doxycycline, azithromycin and minocycline are used in grade 3 acne and also in grade 4 acne in the oral forms, whereas in body acne you can also use these drugs with isotretinoin if the person is resistant to isotretinoin alone. So in this slide you will see the tretinoin derivatives which are acting on RAR alpha, beta and gamma receptor, whereas adapalene is only effective on the beta and gamma receptor, and these are belonging to C category, whereas tazarotene which is belonging to X category. That means it should not be used during pregnancy or even ideally be avoided in patients. The other groups are basically having either to D category or X category. So in pregnancy it's better to avoid this kind of preparations. So this is all about today's discussion, and hopefully this will help you to become a better clinician and acquire better knowledge in dermatology in future. Thank you so much for this vivid description of dermatological pharmacology. Thank you once more.